Welcome, everyone, to episode 16 of the Precious Metal Gents podcast. I'm Zan, here with Brian, coming to you almost after week one of the NFL season. We are recording right now, and the MNF game is on. Aaron Rodgers making his triumphant return to the field. Brian, how you feeling about week one? Jordan Love obviously avoided a major injury, but, still got a knee injury, and you've got now Malik Willis looking like he's stepping in. How you feeling after week one?
Yeah, I had no idea that Jordan Love was going to get injured when they signed Malik Willis. I just figured that's kind of a nice pickup. Maybe they can develop him into something decent and, even use him as trade bait or something down the road. But seeing how the first week ended, it was just really sloppy. I think you saw a lot of offenses on Sunday that were just really sloppy, and that's typical of week one. I think it was just compounded with the fact that the Packers were playing in Brazil. I hate the NFL World Tour, basically, what they're doing, where they're just selling it. I can't stand it. I couldn't stand it when they were doing London. They're playing on these soccer fields which are meant to just give more, and it's just a sloppier foundation of turf. It's just a different type of footing, and these guys are weighing, a ton more than a soccer player, and they're cutting a lot harder. So when everybody's curious as to why these, it's a soccer field, it shouldn't be like this. Well, it's because they're cutting hard and the turf is looser. It's just the nature of a soccer field. So they shouldn't be playing on those fields, number one. I'm not saying that contributed to them losing, but it was just a sloppy game in general, a lot of flags too. And you saw a lot of craziness around the NFL on Sunday, but I'm glad it's back. I think I start really liking the NFL more like around week 3, 4. I feel like teams start settling in and you start seeing who's good and the storylines start playing out. So we'll ride out the Jordan Love thing here in Wisconsin. And I guess I heard today that he might come back week 4. They're not even going to put him on IR.
They put him on IR,
yeah. But he's going to come back they think week 4. So
they won't put him on IR.
So they won't put him on IR, and they're going to try to get him back week 4.
Okay.
He's even talking crazy, like he's trying to do everything he can to play this week, but he's obviously not playing this week. He can talk all he wants, but it's not happening. So it is what it is.
Yeah, they'll be fine. Patriots' expectations this year were low. I think everybody assumes that we were predicted us to finish last in the division, which we may still. It's very well a possibility because we're not a great team, but we beat Joe Burrow in the Bengals, which was a pretty satisfying loss. So, yeah, it was an interesting week one. I know you guys don't tune into us to hear us talk about football, so we will move on to cards. We don't have any mail days today, but we did bring up an interesting pair of cards for Card of the Week Showcase, which I highlighted on my story this morning. 2 cards that ended on Fanatics Collect Weekly last night. Isaac Bruce and Curtis Martin, 98 Flair Brilliance 24 karat gold cards, both graded PSA 8. Both ended at the exact same sales price of $4,680, which is extremely high. Prior sales of those cards, the Bruce, had sold, I believe, for $600 earlier this year, and I think the last sale on it was around $900. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I know the Curtis Martin, same thing, sold for between high 900s. And a friend of mine actually had a copy of that card and had sold it in consolidation. I think it's the same copy that was auctioned off. And it was on Mark Fun Your Cards' story for like $1,100 for, a week or something like that. 2 weeks, nobody bought it. He had been trying to sell it for $1,100. The guy bought it from him for, $1,000, then couldn't sell it for $1,200. So it was very strange to see both of these cards hit $4,680. I got confirmation earlier today that both were paid for. Same buyer. One person messaged me that he was involved in bidding on these 2 cards. Is actually the same person who bought the Favre 24 karat gold PSA 8 for $25,000. I'm not going to obviously reveal who that is because he hasn't posted it. but he was involved in bidding on both of these up until, I think he said $3,000 or something. I told him he shouldn't have run them up so high. But that tells me that he was in it, the winner was in it, and there was someone in between there, because if he stopped at 3,000, there had to be another bidder that the winner outbid to get these cards. So I'm still trying to process what happened with these. But what was your first inclination when you saw these, and what are you thinking now as we talk about them?
I was about to go back and do some edits to the wide receiver market PowerPoint that we did a couple weeks ago, because I think Bruce's highest sale was like $1,000. This is 4x that. So yeah, I mean, this is a really strong sale. I guess it's even more than strong. It's just, I think it's really high. Not to say like this card isn't worth that. I'm not here to like judge what cards are worth. I'm not a Beckett magazine, but eventually it could be worth that. Just looking at like recent comps of these cards, like I think most people would agree that unless this is going to like a Isaac Bruce collector that has been looking for this card forever, and this is like the last one that they need for their like whatever they're trying to do in their collection, I could see overpaying. And we've talked about this before, like you and I both have overpaid for cards, and I have no problem overpaying for cards that I really want, and I'll continue to do it. It's not really about the money necessarily, because again, I'm not trying to like resell these for profit down the road. But this is clearly like a really, really high price. I get like paying 20-30% more because the collector's fee for buying some of these rare cards. Even more than that, like if it's a 101, there's really no pricing with it. You're just going to pay what you're going to pay. But something like this, I mean, there's plenty of comps, these 24 carats, and just to see both of them sell for the exact same price. And if you're going to start talking about like just a comparison of markets, I don't know if Isaac Bruce and Curtis Martin's markets are even like the same. I mean, if you looked at like a comparison, I don't know what Curtis Martin's doing right now, but I know a couple of years ago when I was looking at some of his cards, just because I thought it'd be cool to start collecting some like running backs that I liked. When I was getting more into like some of the 90s stuff other than Brett Favre, I was looking at some of his cards. I mean, they were like, people were practically giving the things away compared to other players. So I know Isaac Bruce is a cheaper market too, but I just find it ironic that these things are both sold at not like close to the same price, literally the exact same price, which is really weird to me.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned that about the Bruce collector looking for this for a long time, because I think I actually made a joke on one of our earlier podcasts. This is like, for some reason, there's 24 copies of this, but it seems like this and the Manning, there are so many more of, because I was looking back at the sales of the Bruce 24 karat, and it sold in November of 2023. It sold in December of 2023, March of 2024, April 2024, May 2024, and then this copy. And these are all, I mean, not all of them are all distinct, but there's at least like 5 or 6 different ones here. The Curtis Martin outsold the 99 credentials now 5, or actually it was the same sales price, and is only second to some of his greens. Like you say, neither of these guys has a particularly strong market, but it makes sense in terms of the guy who was telling me now about the Favre, he's trying to put together the Hall of Famer set from 24 karat. And that makes some sense to me, that he might go high, but then 2 people above him, it's like, well, where were they 2 months ago, when all these sold? They could have had them for a lot cheaper. But again, we've talked about this before, which is like new entrants coming into the market like weekly, or every 2 weeks, that have deep pockets and are just like, wow, this shit looks cool. Let me just throw, 4 stacks at it, and not knowing exactly what they should be paying, and not caring, what type of price they're paying or what it means for the rest of the market.
Yeah, and I don't know who this person, the person is that finally got it, but like you even say to me the $3,000, the guy that was trying to put together the Hall of Fame set of 24 karat, like that's awesome. I can understand why you'd pay strong for the cards, because when they pop up, you got to get them. So like when you say 3,000, to me that doesn't even seem that crazy to a person doing that, because I think if you look back, like search a Troy Aikman sold right around the same time that I bought my Brett Favre last October, and I think it sold for like it was around like 4,000 or something like that. If you look at Card Ladder, its sales got to be on there. It's like literally sold like a week after the Favre. So you figure like a Troy Aikman, for the 4,000 some dollar range, and then with like the bump that these cards have gotten recently, if someone got it for 3,000, you figure maybe like a strong payer or a strong buyer that's collecting the set, 3,000 is not crazy, but like 4,680. I mean, that's still 1,680 more than what we're talking about, and who knows who this person is. Now, again, they might be a collector. They might be doing the exact same thing. Great. It's just we have to kind of talk about it and take pause to the fact that like these sales are not. This isn't like organic growth. And you'd think like, yeah, because we like 24 carats and we buy 24 carats. Well, I have one 24 carat in football, and then I hope to get a second one. Or no, I actually have two because of the Warfel. But like, I'm not trying to go crazy with them. I don't have a ton of them. I buy them for like brewers and that. But someone like us that likes 24 karat, you think, oh yeah, we'd be jumping for joy. This is great, but it's not, because it's not organic growth. And like in it, what you're going to have happen is you have people coming in the 90s that got money and they're going to start buying these things, and then the prices will go down, and then they'll get burnt on them. It's the same thing that happened with people when they rush into like ultra modern stuff, buying up crazy things for insane prices, and then the market goes down, and then they get pissed off at it, sell, and then you get this flood of cards being sold for dirt cheap, and it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the long run.
Yeah, I think everybody who buys '90s cards likes the idea of them going up, but not this kind of ascent so rapidly. I mean, it makes everybody shrug their shoulders, scratch their heads. Especially, I mean, we've talked about platform before and suspicions with Fanatics Collect and the lack of transparency with the bidding system. And so I think that inevitably plays a role in the formulation of our opinion about these sales, is that we can't help but be a bit suspicious when we see these consistently high sales, and then we see the outliers always seem to be on the same platform. If these were eBay sales, I'd feel maybe a bit differently. I mean, I'd still be a bit confused, but I would feel a little bit better about it, even though, you tell me that the person's paid. It doesn't necessarily assuage all my concerns that I have about the transparency associated with a particular platform.
Yeah, I think the platform definitely plays into it. Obviously, it makes it a little more strange because I know the person that's sitting there looking at auctions from the inside, and I don't trust them as far as I could throw them.
Right.
But
And there's more than one,
yeah, it's not just that one. There's
I
plenty of
think
them.
of like this underground like war room where all the fanatics collect. They're watching all the screens of the bids in real time.
Yeah,
See,
if you
hey,
put
pump that one,
yeah, and if you put their brains all together in one, it might make one like decent, knowledgeable person about cards.
One
Maybe.
creature. Yeah. All right. Well, we've spent enough time on the 24 carats. We've got a few listener questions before we get into our main segment with Aaron here in a little bit. So looks like we've got three. Brian, you want to start us out with the first listener question?
So the first one's from Andy, Bye Bye Baby Cards. He was our first guest on. Love Andy. Like to get him back on the show. He asked, should consolidation companies buy cards from their clients that were intended for the consolidation effort, and then in turn go and auction them off on a platform he has a partnership with? What's the role in a consolidation funding company? And should they play a more active advising role, or just do whatever the client tells them to do? So a bunch of questions in there, multi-phased questions. But
Yeah, this is interesting, and sounds like it stems from some type of experience, and I won't, go into what that may or may not be. But in regards to his question, what I think he's asking is, or what he's describing is a situation where a collector or a customer, if you want to call them that, purchases or asks a funding company to purchase a card for that person. And then, customarily, or at least so far with Fund Your Cards and Wharf, and if there are any others, typically you send your cards to the company and then they are either sold privately first in the instance of Fund Your Cards, and then auctioned if they don't sell privately, or with Wharf, they go straight to auction. I think what he's describing is a situation where, for instance, say the funding company comes to them and says, okay, well, I bought this card for you for $2,000. You have those cards there for, they look to be worth $1,000. I'll give you 900 for them. And so then the funding company pays the customer $900, or puts it towards their tab, I should say. 900 towards the tab, and then those cards come in. And then the funding company goes and auctions them. I guess you could sell them privately, or auctions them, on a platform that maybe they get like a preferred rate with, or whatever it may be. I don't know how all that works. And what that does then is it allows, in addition to whatever fee you're paying the funding company, 10% or whatever it is, it allows the funding company to then go make an additional margin off of the client by virtue of the fact that that person has a relationship with the platform that they're selling them through. So to me, I think that's not in the spirit of transparency. And so if it were me and I was the client, I would feel cheated by that. And what I want, and the only thing I want, is for the cards to either go to auction or be sold privately, and I get final say as the client, as to what they can sell for, basically. Because otherwise, if I'm getting cash from the funding company up front, it's put towards my tab, that's great, but I also know they're probably offering me something less than the market value of those cards, because they expect to make some money on top of that by whatever preferred sales method they have. So yeah, that would rub me the wrong way. I mean, I think the consolidation company's role is to do what the client wants, so long as it's ethical and in line with the business practice, the goals of that business. And if the client wants them to engage in some kind of advisory role, then they can, if they have that ability to do so. But generally speaking, there's something of like a fiduciary duty to the client to, maximize the client's return, because the funding company is already getting a fee for the services and doesn't need to make an additional fee sort of behind the client's back. That's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's a really interesting question, and one that hasn't happened to me personally, but just trying to think through how it would feel if it did. What do you think about this? This is really interesting.
Well, just like in theory, if you're just looking at it at face value and just saying, is this right? I don't think it's right, because, like you mentioned, you're paying the company, the funding service. You're paying them as a service. You're their client. Okay, so first and foremost, you're trusting them to give you advice. For example, the stuff that we're talking about right here, this example, this is not related to Mark at Empire State, who's Fund Your Cards. This is not him. And I'll just give an example. I've only used him for funding, and I've asked him probably more questions than he really cares to answer, but he answers every question I have for him. And I had a bunch of questions for him when I buy a card, like, if I send these in, what do you think the market value would be? What platform should I use to auction them? Do you think I should do this? Do you think I should do that? and I probably annoy him with them, but he's always very cordial and answers my questions the best of his ability and tells me what he thinks when it comes to grading, when it comes to like all this stuff. I fire off all sorts of questions to him. So the customer service is there with them. That's what I would expect with somebody who I'm paying to help fund a card and then help me consolidate as a collector, consolidate my collection the best way possible. Now, is he trying to make money? Yeah, it's a business, but he's making that money up front when he charges me the fee when I hire him to buy the card. So that's his benefit of it. Now, if Mark came back to me and said, hey, I collect X player and I see you're selling a card that I'd really like for my collection. Would you mind if I bought you what I think fair market values, we agree on a price, and then, I could have it for my collection? I would probably say, yeah, sure, great. And then he just used that towards my total. It'd make it easier for me. If you send it to like a selling platform, you still have to pay a fee. And if he sells it on his own, it's not a guarantee that he would get more. So if he says he collects the player, I think he's going to give me a decent price for it. So yeah, I would sell it to him. But then, I would expect the fact that that card wouldn't show up on a selling platform where then he was selling to make a profit. So all in all, I think it's bad business. If you want to see people returning customers, this is a new business or a new industry, this funding service. There's really only a couple prominent people that do it, and there's bound to be more with how popular it is and how popular it's getting. I think that people that are in it to get lifelong customers or customers for long term, they're gonna be the ones that are successful, like Fund Your Cards does. And then the people that ruin business relationships, this is a good way to ruin a business relationship, because if you bought this card then turned around and sold it on a selling platform and made a profit, I would kind of look at you like, I paid you to kind of advise me on this process, this consolidation process, and then you're telling me I'm gonna buy it for this price and sell it for this. Like, why would I ever come back to you? Like, why would I ever trust what you're saying? So you're breaking trust, which is the ultimate bond between customer and business, or whatever you want to look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a customer service aspect that you can't replace, and you can't really mend it once it's been broken. All right, another question here we've got from Drake's PC. I was thinking, he sent me this today, and I'm like, Drake is like the equivalent of the subreddit shower thoughts. He's got like an infinite Rolodex, I feel like, of questions, but it's not like they're like these shitty throwaway questions. They're always really good, And but I'm just picturing like Drake, driving on like a business trip, just like he pulls over to write down, a question he's gonna submit for
I see him like under a
crossover or
tree. I see
something.
him like under a tree by a tire swing, and he's just writing down his thoughts. His like,
Yeah, and just these endless, like, great questions. Drake, if you're listening, we do appreciate the weekly questions, and we're just ribbing you because you always ask good ones. He says, card funding. I've used it and use it and think it's a great service, but part of what caused the recent card market collapse over the last couple of years was people buying on credit or taking out loans. They ended up not being able to repay. He doesn't say this, but CPWCC a couple of years ago. He says, two-part question. Do you think card funding is at least a part, however small, of the recent spike in pricing of rare/scarce cards? And can you compare/contrast card funding to taking out loans or buying on credit?
well, to answer his second part first, I don't think it's a small part. I think it's a pretty decent part of some of the spike, like some of the initial ones. I know that we originally talked about some of those early FARF sales in the 90s market that were really huge, and we're like, this could have like a ripple effect, across different players and whatever. And I think it has. And then, it can even relate to other sports too. But some of those bigger purchases were done through funding. So I think it has a decent impact, and it's bound to have more impact down the road as these industries grow and mature. And we were only in the early stages of funding services. They're eventually going to get bigger and more prominent. But as I said to you before we recorded, if you can think back to the housing market crisis and the crash, it's very similar, where they were giving out subprime loans to, basically people that couldn't afford the houses, and they stopped paying their mortgages, and that was the ripple effect. The housing market crashed. I'm not saying it's be exactly the same, but just think of this scenario. If you have just a handful of funding services, let's just say like three or four prominent ones over the next like 5 years. Okay. And then before, that's still an early industry. And then all of a sudden there's a few people that don't pay off their cards in full, or they default on them. They don't pay them off at all. And it's a little bit different too, because if it's a collectible, a card could be sold and they could probably be recouped. But if I'm a person who's working for if I'm funding cards and that's my business, why would I continue to do it if I run this huge risk of people not paying for their loans? Like, they see a card that they got to have, and then, maybe a couple months down the road, they change their mind. If you put too strict of rules, like say, hey, you have to buy this card, but all of your cards have to be paid off in like 45 days or 30 days, you then also run the risk of like people defaulting on it too, because who doesn't in America make rash purchases and then 30 days later they can't pay for it? Things pop up, whatever. So like, there's this fine line. Like, if you make the time frame too small, you're going to have more people not being able to pay for it. If you make it too long, you could have people obviously changing their mind and not paying for it as well. So it's like, there's all these factors that come into play. But to answer his main question, could it cause a collapse? Yeah, it could. It's great for the hobby, for people that can pay for it. But I think the collectors, because most of the people that are buying this stuff, they're collectors. Like, I don't think there's like dealers or flippers or investors that are using funding card services to buy cards. I really don't think there's many. Yeah, there's probably some, but I doubt that there's a lot. So these are mostly collectors, and I think collectors have some responsibility too, to make sure you're paying back your card loans. They're not getting credit checked. I think in time, if collectors are not paying back these cards that they're buying, you're going to start seeing these funding services ask for cards in like collateral. So not like cards that you're sending to fund the card, but they're going to say, like, they'll look at your IG page, or they'll ask you to send them a couple screenshots of, you buy a $5,000 card. Okay, well, show me like $5,000 of cards that you own currently that you could send to me to hold in a vault or whatever until you pay this off as collateral. Or even like, hey, send me like 40% to hold in cards or something like that.
Yeah. I'm curious about Drake's question. Made me think about sort of the setup of some of these funding companies. And I have no idea how they're set up or what the business plans are, but it seems like it's a ripe opportunity for there to be pitfalls as you expand and you get more people using the service. I think it's inevitable that some of those people will not be able to pay off the card. For me, since I've used these services, I've had to sign a contract with Fund Your Cards. I don't think I signed one with Wharf. Could be wrong about that, but I don't think I did. And so, there's that component. But like, they don't know me other than knowing kind of who I am through Instagram. Like, they don't know my financial situation. They don't know what cards I have in my collection. Obviously, there's cards on my page, but what if I like go to them and I'm like, hey, can you buy this $20,000 card for me? And they're like, yeah, sure. But I've got, $10 worth of cards in a shoebox in my office.
Luca-based prisms. You have a bunch of 10 Luca-based prisms.
So many. I've got so many. Just stacking them up. They're going to be worth something one day. But, they don't know what I've got. And so it's almost like, it's not really a credit check, but in a way it's like a card credit check, which, like you said, the idea of collateral seems to make some sense. What happens if like a guy gets, a $50,000 card and he gets halfway through paying off? He's like, oh, I can't afford the rest of it. I don't have any more cards to send you. And then there's a way out of it. I mean, at least the funding company has the card and they could do something with it, like they could resell it. But what if they resell it and they resell it for a loss? And obviously that's just one example, but that creates a big headache. And I think the first time that happens, maybe there's some safeguards put in place if they're not already there. And also, I don't know, like if I breach the contract, like, are they going to sue me? I don't know. Maybe I'll try it and find out. No, I'm just kidding. But like, there's really no way to know what happens when things go wrong. I mean, maybe things have gone wrong and we don't know about it. But there's risk in this business model. And I'm not saying either Fund Your Cards or Wharf is doing anything wrong. They're going to go belly up because of this or anything like that. But it does seem almost like there's a too good to be true, which is everybody wins. The collector gets to get a card they want that's too expensive, and they can pay whatever they want because I'm going to help them out. And, then their cards are all going to go to auction. They're going to set new record highs. It seems a little bit too good to be true, which you mentioned kind of the analogous to the housing market. But there's definitely some inherent risks associated with it. And the only way that I think we'll see them is over time.
Here's another thought too. What happens? I feel like the card funding services are really only 100% successful if the card market in general is decently successful. Not for the card that you're purchasing, but the cards you're selling. Because ultimately, like, yeah, is it kind of like a credit card that's got probably lower interest rates? Sure. Like you could say, if there's 45 days to pay the card off, you buy like a $10,000 card. Let's say you got 45 days to pay that card off, plus the fees, whatever they charge up front. But you're buying that assuming that you probably have some cards that you could quickly consolidate or send to them, and they'll do the process for you because you feel comfortable that you could sell them for what you're thinking you're going to get. With funding services, bigger cards are going for more money or, asking price because people are buying them. Like I see a 101 superfractor. I want it. I'm going to contact the funding service. They're going to go get it for what they're asking. I don't care. I want the card. I'm not thinking about it because I don't have to pay anything out of my pocket. It doesn't hurt right away, right? But then I'm going to sell all these other cards that are probably pretty good cards that could add up to, maybe $5,000, $6,000. They're flooding the market. So every time somebody buys a card, you're selling other cards and it's creating more surplus or supply in the card market, right? So I'm assuming that when people are buying these bigger cards, they probably have some decent cards too, and they're increasing the volume, or they're increasing the surplus or supply in the market. So it might be helping one market, but it's also maybe hurting like the mid-end market because those are the types of cards that you're selling. So does it have a continuous effect of keeping the entire card market decent? Well, as we've seen, and we talked about these cards that week, I mean, those would be like normally mid-end cards. They went for high-end card prices. So, I mean, as of right now, yeah, looks great. But how long is that sustainable? When people stop getting what they want for the cards they're trying to consolidate, are they less willing to use a funding service because they think, well, I got to pay more cash? If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to keep using it because it's convenient to me and I know I can pay them off. But, if I'm the funding service, I worry a little bit about, maybe who I'm doing business with. All right. Last listener question here before the main segment. This is from @JazzChaser, Chase on Instagram. Great page if you haven't checked him out. Has some really cool Broncos and Jazz stuff from the 90s and early 2000s. He asks, what do you think contributes more to long-term collectability? Number one, parallel that remains similar year after year, like Prism Gold, or two, a parallel that has a significant design change each year, like Star Rubies, PMG, etc.
I think there's just differences in collectability. I don't think it necessarily like one contributes more to long-term collectability than the other. But I think if you had to like you had to get a straight answer from me, I would say I like continuity. So I love the Prism Gold, but it's got to be at the right number. So like the one thing I love about Prism Gold, since you brought it up, I'll just use that as the example, is that they decided early on that golds are going to be out of 10, and we're going to keep it out of 10 for the history of us making cards for the foreseeable future. I think what a company like Topps Chrome how they hurt themselves is that they constantly are changing around the different numbering for their parallels, which kills. So if you're talking about parallels, I think changing the numbering and stuff around is a pain. It's terrible for collectors who are going to sustain the long collectability of the cards long after the people who are pack ripping and stuff are out of the industry or out of the card market. Now, I won't say that like, he mentions Star Rubies or PMGs. I think those types of parallels, I think it was kind of cool that they changed the design and changed how they look. I think that adds to those two particular that he talks about, Rubies and PMGs. It actually adds to the collectability, in my opinion, just because I like to see the difference. I think it would get boring if you constantly just had like a red foiled card for every single PMG year, and they didn't change to like the the circles design or the sculpt design or like the kind of metallic gold design for the 99s. I think that actually added something to the parallel. But if we're talking like the standard straight like parallels, like the golds or the blacks or whatever, they got to keep the serial numbering the same. They got to keep the look kind of the same and focus on the design of the card and keep the parallel design or aesthetic the same.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about keeping the aesthetic similar. Yeah, because when I think of gold parallels, I don't think of Topps Chrome and like all the popular early 2000s finest cards. O2 X Fractor out of 20, not a gold. I know that the X Fractors the gold X Fractors in 05 and 06 are very desirable, but they're not. I mean, they are gold, but it's not like a traditional what we think of as a gold parallel because there's that checkerboard pattern. And then you've got inconsistent numbering in other years. Topps Chrome, same deal. And so when I think about gold, I'm thinking Prism. My only issue is that some players are going to have like, who knows, 12, 13 Prism cards. I mean, it's rare, but I'm like Russell Wilson. He's going to have like 12 or 13 different gold Prisms. And some guys will have 8, 9, 10. And so I think Prism Gold will be collectible and it will have enduring value. But I don't think that every single year of Prism Gold will have equal value. Now, there may be some years, where like 2020, the rookies may have like Burrow or Herbert or Love or Hurts may have enduring value because they're rookies. But generally speaking, if there's a player in the 2020 and they're also somehow in 2014 and 2012, I don't think the 2020 is going to outsell the 14 or the 12. So I'd look at those early years of Prism where the patterns are different. 12 is in its own league, and then 14's got the full coverage. But then as you go along, the designs are just these very minor tweaks on the prior year, and you have pretty similar variations of the same type of card each year over the last 5-6 years basically, versus to me the 90s where you have these parallels that survive only 2-3 years, maybe 4 years, that change designs each year and didn't have the opportunity to jump the shark basically. Had they gone on, maybe the designer would have run out of ideas and they would have become repetitive and less desirable. But because there was a finite number of years, you only had the good basically. I mean, you can kind of see it with essential credentials, right? Like after you hit 01 into 02, 03, 04, that it kind of goes downhill. And some of those have they affected the legacy of the 97s through the 99s? Maybe not a ton, but I would say that if you look at PMGs only, you don't have to worry about any quote unquote bad years. And so I think that all of those will be, all the Prism Golds, all those 90s cards will be collectible, but I don't necessarily think that just because it's a Prism Gold that every year will be collectible.
If you think of if we just look directly at his question and just think of, what he's saying at face value, what contributes more to long-term collectability? The consistency and continuity, or the design change to make it fresh and unique? I mean, if we had to give a consensus, idea, I mean, I would think that the design change, technically, to answer his question, would allow Parallel to be more unique and collectible long term, just because it keeps it fresh. I personally, like I said before, I like the continuity. So I love doing the gold run. So I want all the golds, like Aaron Rodgers. I want all the golds. I don't care if it's the 2019, which I don't like that Prism design in general. I still want the gold. I don't care. So if I'm doing a gold a run, I want them to look the same. I don't like when they change it up. But it really depends on the parallel, because with PMGs, I think it's cool to have 3 different ones. So I guess if you're talking about to keep it interesting and keep it collectible long term, when you change things up, sometimes you get people to think, oh well, I should buy this one because it looks totally different than the last year's. It's not getting boring. Or I could see why, like you said, some people who collect Prism Golds, they might get bored by the time they're, if they start in 2012 and they get to 21, 22, 23, they might start getting boring to collect. Oh, just here's another one. You know what I mean? They don't look that much different. I get it. But it's really it's tough to answer the question fully, just what a single black and white answer, because it really depends on the parallel. It depends on the type of collection, the person, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there are a lot of intricacies involved with that. So thank you for that question. All good questions. Send them in for next week. All right, we have Aaron coming on the show at Compton's Cards. Hope everyone enjoys this conversation, and go give Aaron a follow on Instagram. All right, I am here with Aaron at Compton's Cards on Instagram. Aaron and I have been talking for probably about a year, maybe longer now. So I appreciate you joining the pod tonight, man.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me, Zan. Glad to be here. Love the podcast. It's something I look forward to every week and listen to. It's nice music for my commute into work every Thursday.
There you go.
But yeah,
I like to hear it.
It has been about a year. I think I went all in on Andruw starting at about July of 23. That's when I got out of everything else and went straight in, all in on 90s. So
that's right.
Back.
And we met each other earlier this year at Culture Collision here in Atlanta. I think which is also this weekend. Are you planning to be there for this show?
I'm not. I've got a bachelor trip to Biloxi. Really wish I could go, but got other priorities, unfortunately.
I was gonna say the Beau Rivage is better than the Cobb Galleria, so I think you win there.
Yeah, it'll be a good time, but Culture Collision's always great, and there's actually a surprising decently amount of 90s there. I mean, not a ton, but right. 15-20% of the tables had decent 90s cards, and I had a good time out there.
Yeah, it's a great show for go for a couple hours. Maybe not a full weekend, but for right. a day, it's solid. So, well, you mentioned a second ago that you about a year ago, a little over a year ago, you got into Andruw and the 90s stuff. Take us back to the beginning, when you first started collecting. We try to walk through this with all guests so we can kind of get an idea of where it started, and then I guess how it developed over the years, and then culminated in when you kind of came back to collect.
Yeah. So I collected as a kid, just like most of us, from about the time I was about 5 to 12. So that'd be 2000 to 2007. So I'd rip packs from Walmart, Kmart, wherever, go to flea markets, hobby shops, go to my friends' houses and trade. Every weekend we had a store back home called Books A Million, and we'd do a trade day where we'd go and trade with other kids. And I had just, a bunch of shitty base cards pretty much. I still got one of my childhood binders, but not much to show for in it. 2006 LeBron James base is probably the best card in there. But
Nice.
so I did that, got out of cards for a while, and it wasn't back until 2020. I was actually playing golf, and I went to a sports bar back here called Baumhauer's, and there's a hobby shop right down the road, and we'd all had a few beers, and one of my buddies was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna go hit this hobby shop if you want to tag along." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." So I go with him, and I bought 2 cards, and this is back in 2020. I think I paid $400 for a base Trae Young optic and a base Luka Doncic rookie. One was a PSA 9, one was a PSA 10. But looking back, yeah, that's just absurd on what those cards were doing. They're probably like $15 max at this point. But yeah, just did that, and then in 2021, I got up with some local friends, and we started going to shows and dealing, mainly more in the flipper sphere. And then in 2022, I started more like seriously collecting, and I got into LeBron, MJ, Kobe, Brady, Tiger, T-Mac, mainly exquisite, SP authentic, Topps finest refractors, gold refractors, X fractors. More of the better cards in the mid tier for those players in the 2 to 3K range. But the collecting wasn't pure. I'd buy them and I'd get tired of them after 3 or 4 months, and I'd end up selling them. Had a good time doing that, and then in late 2023 or mid 2023, I guess I should say, I started buying more of like Griffey bonds and MJ inserts, like the Dunk and Go Nuts and the Take It To.net, stuff like that. I was buying Griffey legacies and, like I said, mid-tier cards, red labels. And then late 2023, I came across a big Andruw collector that was selling out, and I saw the 24 karat. That was my first big card, and I was like, man, I can get one of Andrew's best cards for a low to mid-tier Griffey. And it just shot me off in a spree of player collecting, and I absolutely fell in love with it, just to kind of try to throw together the best personal player collection that I possibly could. Just the rarity and scarcity in these cards, and the thrill of trying to get every card you can. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've watched you kind of develop into that, and I had a similar experience to you with getting back into it, and you get tired of the cards, and you get addicted to the flip a little bit, and I think there's some of that. And you're pretty, like you said, you started kind of the 2007, pretty young guy. You're not even 30. So,
Yeah.
what about, most of the guys that we talk to are, mid to late 30s, just because that was when we grew up, was in the 90s. So what is it about the 90s time period? Whether it's the players, the teams, the cards, what is it that kind of draws you to it, given that it was sort of right before you started collecting?
Yeah, so I'll turn 30 in January. So I am, a little bit younger than the typical 90s market. You typically see mid to late 30s, mid 40s in this type of market. But it's the scarcity, the rarity, the design. A lot of these cards were the pioneer cards for the sets today, like the Speckle, the Scope, the Mojo. All that stuff was created in the 90s. It's the OG. It's the real stuff. The starter jackets on the cards, the nostalgia. Like, I think of the 90s and I just think of better times. It brings me back to a better place in my life when I didn't have to worry about as much, and times were better overall. Just the vibrant colors on the cards and the thought. And of course, you had a lot more competition back then in the 90s between the manufacturers. As of today, you've got Panini pumping out the same old bullshit every year. You had real thought, real design, real artist creating these cards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's the main, that kind of speaks to the power of the 90s, which is you don't even have to have been collecting in the 90s to really appreciate it. Because, like Andruw, and we'll talk about A-Rod, those guys did play. I mean, they weren't just in the 90s. Some of their best years were in the 2000s. And so, I don't know if I even said it at the outset. So Andruw Jones, A-Rod, and Auburn alumni, would you say those are kind of your top 3 PCs? And are there any others that I'm missing?
No, that's it, man. Just the 5 different players, 3 of them being Auburn players, and A-Rod and Andruw. A-Rod, his career spanned all the way to 2017, so I grew up watching him from the time he was a Mariner throughout his whole Yankee career. And then Andruw, big Braves. I'm from North Alabama here in Huntsville. So around here, it's all college football. There's no real pro teams. It's either War Eagle or Roll Tide. And the game last weekend for Auburn was pretty unfortunate. Looks like same old Peyton Thorne, same old losing season, but maybe it'll get better. But yeah, so I grew up just with favorite players. I'm not real attached to any pro teams, and Andruw and A-Rod were just two of my favorite players growing up to watch on SportsCenter every single night when I went to bed. Big power hitters. They could field. They had the speed. They had all the tools. 4 or 5 tool players. Great careers.
Two guys
Yeah.
that should both be in the Hall of Fame. Probably, hopefully, will be eventually if people can see past Rod's personality.
Yeah, that and the old steroid thing, which I've never been big on the whole steroid thing. I think 60-70% of the league was doing it, and who knows what the guys in the 40s and 50s were doing. I mean, they were probably blowing coke and heroin in the dugouts. I mean, heard stories about Mantle and whatnot. So
Hank Aaron and his greenies,
Yeah.
What Auburn? You said 3 Auburn players. I know Frank Sanders and Stephen Davis are 2 of them. Is Takeo Spikes? Is he the third?
Yeah, Takeo Spikes is the third. So actually, that's Stephen Davis is the number 1 NFL rushing running back from Auburn in history. Statistically, of course, you got Bo Jackson, but he was hurt.
Right.
I believe in 91 or 92. Actually, on my birthday, on January 13th, is the day he had that hip injury that put him out. So he doesn't have anything in the late 90s. They quit producing his cards in 92 or 93. So his cards are all junk wax era. So you don't have any PMGs, no Star Rubies, nothing of that nature. So if he did have them, I'd probably be one of his biggest collectors, and I'd have a straight Bo Jackson PC. But unfortunately, I'm stuck with Stephen Davis, Frank Sanders, and Takeo Spikes. And Frank Sanders is actually the number 1 wide receiver from Auburn in the NFL.
Is he?
And then Takeo Spikes is definitely the best linebacker out of Auburn. And it just so happens that they all came out in the late 90s. So
I was going to say, you obviously lived in the late 90s, that period of time. Have you ever been inclined to collect Auburn players, like the NFL cards of Auburn players that were maybe more contemporary, guys that were there while you were there, or that, like Newton, I know he wasn't there while you were there, but Newton and guys like that who came out and were, veritable superstars?
Yeah, so I actually have a 3-row box full of all Auburn autos from 2000 to present. So Cam Newton Exquisites, SP Authentics, Prism Gold, stuff like that. Love those cards, but just not something I put out on my page. They kind of they're on the back burner, so they're not as big of a priorities as the 90s stuff. The 90s stuff stay in the castle. They're in the Zion box, and everything else is in a little cardboard 3-row.
Shanty.
But yeah, I've got everything from Ben Leard to Jarrett Stidham and beyond. So
you've touched every graduating class probably of Auburn players somehow.
And I've got a big affiliation to the 2004 team. I went to that SEC championship. That's when we had Jason Campbell and Ronnie Brown and Cadillac and Carlos Rogers, and that was the peak of Auburn football right there. But unfortunately, it's been a rough past 5 years. So hopefully we can get back to those days sometime.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm just gonna keep collecting the 90s guys, my three dudes.
I was gonna say that they had that string of running backs with Davis, those 2 guys you named. Rudy Johnson was in there, like
Rudy
guys
was big
that were
in like 02.
Consummate, like lead backs in the NFL. So how do so 3 PCs, A-Rod, Andruw, Frank Sanders. Let's say you're a big one of those 3 comes up. Let's say a big one of each of those 3 comes up. Which one are you most inclined to go for? What's sort of the low on the totem pole where you said, I'll cut something from that to fund, the number 1 PC?
Yeah, so definitely the Auburn players, just because they're so much cheaper than the A-Rod and the Andruw. But as far as hierarchy, I definitely go for sentimental value, at least, is Auburn, then Andruw, then A-Rod. And really the whole reason I got into A-Rod is because I got stuck in my Andruw collection. There's there's only a few like really big cards that I want. That'd be like the Gem Masters or maybe like a Row Zero Masterpiece, something of that nature. Fusion Titanium. But those cards, they don't come up and often. It may be 2 or 3 years before I find them. And luckily, the number one on my list was the Essential Credentials Now, which I was fortunate to land earlier this year, about a month or two ago. But
take me through that because I know that you had been, since I'd known you, you'd wanted that card, which is for those lists, 98 Essential Credentials Now, Andruw Jones, numbered to 18. Is that right?
It's to 18.
18.
Yeah.
So tell me about that, what it was about that card that you wanted and why it was number one, and then sort of how the deal came together, how you found it and everything like that.
Yeah, so one sold back in January 2023, and that's before I got into A-Rod. We were into Andruw, and that was his biggest sale of all time. And it was the only one that had sold in the past 10 years, so I knew this was going to be a monster. That exact copy that sold has never shown up. I know most of the big Andruw collectors, and none of them own it that I'm aware of. So I honestly have no idea where it is. So once I started collecting him, that was a big one on my radar that I didn't get from the original guy that I bought a lot of my big ones from. Like I got the 98 PMG from him, the 97. What was it? Oh yeah, I got the 99 24 karat. My bad, not 97. But and then I ended up getting the Future from Grant Slayton a few months later, and then I found the 99 PMG on eBay. One just popped up for like $1,300, and I smashed it in. Right after I started collecting him, it kind of just all fell together within the first 3 months. But after I accumulated all those, the biggest one on the list was by far the 98 Now. And someone on Facebook one day reached out to me, didn't even have a real profile picture or anything, and he was like, "Hey, I've got this." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely interested." Anyways, he did message back. It didn't work out, and then I saw it pop up on Instagram. So I reached out to the owner of it, and at first, of course, he didn't want to sell it. He's a true collector, and I just put the bee in his ear. I said, "Hey, man, if you ever want to get rid of this, I'm seriously interested." So about 8 months goes by. I throw him a pretty significant cash offer, all cash, and he's like, "I appreciate it, but no thanks." Then the national goes by, and he messaged me, and he told me he had a better offer than my initial offer. But it was cash and trade. So I upped my offer in all cash, and he said, "You know what? Let me think about it." And I said, "Okay, I'll think about it as well," because he reached out and said he was kind of willing to sell, kind of not. It would take a lot, and I actually had the money saved up for a 98 PMG A-Rod put to the side, and I slept on it. And I said, if I don't buy this now, I'll probably never get the chance to own it again. There's only been 2 graded across PSA and Beckett ever. And like I said, I don't know where that other one is that sold in 2023. It may be in the guy's collection until he's dead. Who knows? So I was like, this might be my only shot in the next 10 years. So I got to do it now. So I bit the bullet and I did it and I bought it and I could be happier.
It's an amazing card, and I agree with you. We hear people say, "Oh, I don't know if I'll see it again," but those credentials, low-numbered credentials, truly, I mean, they don't come up very much, and even some of the ones that are higher numbered don't come up much, just because they are locked down. I mean, some of them still in packs. You just don't know. One thing I wanted to ask you about is a few weeks ago we had a question from one of the listeners. I think it was Drake actually, who asked about reporting sales on Card Ladder, private sales. And I know you and I talked a little bit about that. You've, over the past month or two, you've reported some of your private sales to Card Ladder. Take me a little bit through that, what made you decide to do that, and maybe why you picked the cards you picked.
Yeah, so I'd never done it up until about a month ago. Never reported a private sale before. But when you're looking at comps or data on these types of cards that don't transact very often, it's often very hard to find a true price point. So I believe the more data that's out there to see what people are paying for cards like these is just better for the hobby and the market overall. Because a lot of times I have to take comparable players like With A-Rod, I use like McGuire, Sosa, Chipper, Ripken, Quinn, and then I have to take averages from their best cards, like their PMGs, their 24 carats, their Central Credentials, their Star Rubies, Super Rays, and I kind of just have to come up with an average and mesh them all together and get some sort of rough ballpark percentage of what this card is worth. So the more data that's out there and available to people that they can just look up on Card Ladder, I think it's more beneficial than anything. And I get some people want to keep private sales private as they're private, but I've never been one to hide financial or transactions or anything like that. Like if you come on Instagram and you said, "Hey man, what did you pay for this card?" I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to keep it a secret.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really helpful, and it's actually actually made me think about reporting a few as well, just because I'm interested. So, what's that? Is the process like rigorous? I mean, or is it you just submit it and it gets approved sometime later? Like, how does that process work?
No, so you just go in the app and through one of the settings you can submit private sales, and you just put in all the data, the card name, year, number, whatever it may be, and then I just attach a conversation with the seller where we agreed upon a price, and then I take a screenshot of the Zelle or Venmo or PayPal transaction, whatever I did, and I add it in there. And then you submit it, and of course add the picture of the card you bought. And it takes about anywhere from 7 to 12 days to get approved typically, but eventually they'll get around to it and email you and say, "Hey, yeah, it's been approved, it's been added." And if
Okay.
they have any questions, they'll just email you or even DM you on Instagram.
That's great. Great info, and that's something maybe other listeners will take advantage of. You also said you kind of ran through a few players that are somewhat similar to A-Rod or Andruw that you can kind of get those comps. I'm curious. Obviously that can inform you if you're bidding on a card. I don't want to go above X amount because I feel like I'm overpaying. Have you ever had success coming up with some kind of number and telling the seller, "Hey, this guy sold for this guy sold for this, I think it's worth this," and the seller actually buys it?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got 65 cards in my 90s PC. 55 of those I bought privately, and 10 of them I bought on public auction
Okay.
or buy it now. So I've used this method many a times, and if there's no comps, I give them the data. It's like, here's the comparable players, here's the prices, and here's the ballpark value. Normally, we may be within 10 or 20%, but if he's not budgeting, it's a card I want, I just pay up and get it because, like I said, you may not have that chance again. But like Andruw, I use Ivan Rodriguez, like his EC now 98s out of 17. So, and that one did a little bit less than what I paid for my Andruw, but still same ballpark. And then got Jeff Bagwell, Piazza, Vlad Guerrero. They all typically sell in about that same ballpark. I do a lot of data diving on Card Ladder just throughout the day, and most of them are within a 20-30% range of one another. Of course, there's some fluctuation on how scarce it is and how many bins graded, how many's been sold in the past year or 2 years, whatever. But
Is
yeah,
that data you kind of keep on hand? Do you keep like a kind of a spreadsheet of that stuff, or just all stored up in the old steel trap?
yeah, pretty much just when I'm trying to buy a card, I write it all down on a spreadsheet, and I come up with a rough ballpark percentage against each one of the players, and I kind of mesh them all together and send it to the seller. And this is what I came up with, and this is where I'd like to be, and then we typically negotiate and go from there.
That's a great method. I think people don't use data enough when talking about this stuff. You could save yourself a lot of time, a lot of money if you record it. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, and maybe the answer is just no, but I'm curious as to whether you've at any point thought about starting, not necessarily starting a new PC. It can be starting a new PC or expanding the existing ones to include, cards in the 2000s, or have you thought about vintage or going back to ultra modern? Is there any time period of cards that you feel pulling you not away from 90s, but maybe expanding your interest?
Not really, no. So I do enjoy them, and I love looking at them. Like I see 2020 Flawless Football, and I love those cards. I love like the mid 2000s superfractors, like the '05 and '06 finest and the early 2002 finest, X fractors, stuff like that, and Prism Golds from 2012 to present. Love that kind of stuff. But I always just think to myself, you know what? I'd rather save my money and get that big 90 card when it pops up. Because that's what I always think about. I mean, we only have so much money and so much resources, and everyone's situation's different, of course. But if I did end up buying those cards, I feel like I'd end up selling them later. And right now, I'm at the point where I've got these 65 cards, and I don't want to get rid of any of them. I want to hold them all forever, but I'm sure that'll change in the future. But that's pretty much where I'm at. I'd rather just save it for the 90s and get what I love.
I don't blame you. I'm kind of the same way, which is always like the opportunity cost, right, of buying something that's a non-90s card. So you have 65 90s cards. How does that break down? Like, is it like 20, 20, 25, or what is how do you break down between your PCs?
There's like probably around 35 or 40 Andruws. I've got like 15 A-Rods and then about 20 or 25 Auburn cards.
Okay. So are you looking to maybe expand the A-Rod collection a little bit to catch up to the Andruw, or are you kind of content with where it is right now?
I'm trying to be content, but it's hard.
It's really
being
hard.
a collector. There's always cards you want. And like another reason I got into A-Rod is because he's in a lot of sets that Andruw isn't.
Right.
Like the Mystique Established, the Man Refractor, the Fortune 15 Refractor, cards like that. I love those cards. So I've got 2 of the 3, and I'm sure there's a lot of other stats that he's in. Just he's had a much longer career. Of course, he's got like the 96 Mirror Gold out of Select. That's a card I want eventually, but just got to save up the money without trying to get rid of these cards that I don't want to get rid of. So it's making it tough when you get to the point where it's like, all right, I don't got anything I really want to get rid of. So
yeah, you're at that point where you're on the cusp of maybe needing to consolidate. In some ways, it's like, I hope a big card doesn't come up. You know,
right.
like an A-Rod 98 PMG, because then you'll be having a long look at the old Zion case. You know?
Yeah, if one of those Gym Masters pops up, like an Andruw, something's got to go. Some of those A-Rods are going to go bye-bye.
Yeah.
Be hitting up Funder cards, or one of those guys like, hey man, I need some money. Come help me out. I'll pay you back, I promise.
That's right. Yeah, I promise. Take me at my word. What's the anything you've set for yourself as do you set collecting goals, or, kind of things that you want to check off? I don't know, like 3 things for 2024 that I wanted to do, card related. And have you hit those? Anything in 2024, maybe for the rest of the way that you're looking to do?
Yeah, so like I don't really set any overarching like goals, but I do have lists of favorite cards that I want to acquire. And I try to knock those off from top down, but of course you just got to get them when they pop up, when they come available. So right now it's the Spikes 98 PMG. I still don't have that. He was a rookie in 98, so he's not in 97. The Frank Sanders 97 Rubies. Never seen one ever, not even a picture of it. It's not even on Trading Card Database. So, and then Frank Sanders 98 Super Rave. And I was lucky enough I got a Taquillo Spike Super Rave out of 25, the 98, his rookie. And Frank Sanders 24 karat gold. Found a local collector on Instagram that was nice enough to sell them to me. And those are both at PSA, and I'll be happy to get those back.
That's awesome. So, are those your top 3 overall cards that you're looking for right now? Or
of course, number 1 would have to be that Andruw Gym Masters, and I don't care if it's the base or the MLPD. I'll take either one of them. I've never seen either one of them, so it may be in some old man's basement or attic. Who knows? Could be at the bottom of the sea. And then there's a few of the Flair Showcase masterpieces that I'd like. The top 2 being the 97 Row Zero, being the first 101s released, and then the 98 Row 1. I would also probably buy the 98 Row Zero, but being a horizontal card, it's not as meaningful to me as the vertical shimmer looking 98. I prefer the row 1 over the row 0 in the 98.
And the 98 Row 2 masterpiece is floating around, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a
Saw that
couple of them that have been floating around. There's been 2 different ones. There's one in a BGS 9, I believe it's a 97, and then there's a 98 Row 2 PSA 7 that's floating around.
Okay, yeah.
Pretty much just between the resellers, but those just have the base matte finishes and haven't really done it for me, like the ones with the intricate designs, like the speckle, shimmer, mojo type cards.
Right. It's hard to pay $1,500 for the Road 2 masterpiece when you can just get a Road 2 Legacy for like $50. You know,
Right? It's like $70 card.
So all right, let's go through. We like to do this top 5 cards in your collection right now. Start us off at number 5, and then work our way down to 1, and give as much information as you want about each card and why you chose it.
Yeah, of course. So number 5 was tough for me. It was between the 98 PMG Stephen Davis and the 97 Certified Team Mirror Gold A-Rod. So I ended up going with the A-Rod, although the 98 is Stephen Davis's only PMG. He was left out of both the 97 and 99 sets. So it's also important when you're looking for these cards to make sure they're in the sets first before you just start Googling them. Because at first I was going on eBay and I was typing in like Stephen Davis 24 karat, and I can't find anything listed. I can't find any comps, nothing. I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I ended up going into, trading card database for baseball. My favorite is Baseball Cardpedia, but make sure your players are in the sets before you start researching them.
Yeah, we got this running joke, C-Dice cards, about the Ray Lewis 98 PMG that it does not exist because he's not in the set, but it's just such a weird, he's such a major player that he's in 97, he's in 99, he's in every set except for that one. But yeah, you got to make sure that they're in there before you spend too much time looking for them.
Yeah, it's so odd. He's like in all the other big sets like Star Rubies and stuff, and he's just not in Metal Universe. And you're like, oh, what the hell?
Yeah,
but
it makes
it is
sense.
what it is. But anyways, number 5. So I'll put it on the screen. Is the
beautiful
97 Certified Team Mirror Gold, and I love these on the back of them. They got a deep bold black stamping, and it's just the first 3 numbers. So these sets, the first 25 were the Mirror Gold. There's actually 500 of each player, and the other 475 are just the base. That one's a PSA 7. It's got a nice big fat print line that you'd love, Zan, right here. So that's
it looks.
got it 7.
It's fantastic looking card, and I think that's still one of the most. Baseball collectors know it well, but to the masses or whatever, it's super underrated insert set that a lot of people don't know about.
It's one of those cards like the 96 Select Gold. They've always sold for an extremely high number. Like even back in like 2020, the Jeter was selling for like $8,000 or $9,000, way before the 90s baseball market took off. Just because these are so scarce. We've only seen 10 different players of the 20-player set sell in the past 5 years. And so when they do come up, they do go for big numbers. And I believe Ripken's the only one that has 7 cards graded.
So strange.
Everyone else has 5 or less graded. This one's a pop 2 with 1 higher.
He sold 4 or 5 times. Ripken has in the past several years, like way more than any other player. It's different copies. Yeah,
most players have 2 or 3 graded by PSA. Some of them have only 1. So there's not many of them out there, and there's a lot more Ripkens floating around. So I don't know what happened there, but just more out there and available. But I'll go into number 4. So number 4, I chose the Andruw Jones 24 karat gold, which is number 8 of 24. RIP Kobe. But this was one of the first big cards that got me into 90s baseball. I saw this on Facebook, and I was like, you know what, I got to have that. So I messaged the guy, ended up buying it, and I ended up buying about probably 12 or 13 more Andrews off of him.
That's pretty cool that you've got that was your first one. That was like your foray, because that's an easy one to get you drinking the Kool-Aid pretty quickly, once you see that in hand.
He actually posted the 99 24 karat gold, the 98 PMG, and then the 99 EC now at a 25.
Wow.
and the 98 Future. And I ended up buying all 4 of them. I didn't buy them all at that one point because at that time I was still
Yeah.
sitting on like a Jordan Exquisite Auto that I had to sell off. And I was like, hey, man, I'll buy these. Just give me like a week to run this on PWCC before it was Fanatics or whatever. And he's like, all right, I'll hold them for you. And he was actually a huge Andruw collector, just selling out to fund a private business. And I
Wow.
got lucky; it just hit at the right time. So
You got like the best imaginable Andruw Jones starter kit.
yeah, it was amazing. He did,
Yeah.
10 years of legwork for me. So it kind of just fell into my lap. And I loved Andruw as a kid. He's just a great ball player, 10-time Gold Gloves, over 430 home runs. He's electric to watch, just very athletic. So until he got chubby in his later days.
Yeah.
But
Stopped caring.
yeah. So number 3, I'll have to go with the A-Rod 24 karat out of the Flair Brilliance. So of course this set was only made 1 year. The shine with the Mylar foil and the gold is just insane. I think it's honestly the best gold refractor type card ever made, in my personal opinion. I know a lot of people favor like the Prism golds, but these are it for me.
Yeah, that's the full coverage of the refractor shine. I love the great shot of A-Rod too. Right,
Oh yeah,
like the way it's framed, like perfect. It's not like how sometimes like Glavine in the '99 credentials now batting, like popping up a foul ball. You know how they sometimes get terrible pictures for great cards.
Right.
That's a nice one there.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. Like most of A-Rod's big cards are all fielding. His Star
Yeah,
Rubies, his Super Rave, his 98 PMG.
it's interesting.
Just pretty much. I've got like 12 cards of his, and I think maybe 2 of them are batting. So
That's weird. I never thought
it's
about
so
that.
crazy. Yeah, not a lot of batting pictures for him and his big cards.
Huh.
But number 2, surprisingly, would be the 98 Essential Credentials Now out of 18 Andruw Jones. That's
Wow, I thought that
number
was going to
2
be
for
number
me.
1. Interesting. Okay.
I went back and forth with it,
Yeah.
but number 1 had to be the 98 PMG. I just absolutely adore this set. I love the backgrounds, the landmarks, all the historical significance they put in these cards, and the story with Arena Design on how they built these cards off of like importing the photos off floppy disk back in 1998. Just absolutely blew my mind. And they're just absolutely gorgeous cards in hand, and they've got the vibrant, bright 90s colors on the back with the big fat font PMG bubble font looking stamp. So just extremely 90s.
And that one in
Love it.
particular too, I love because it's got the Atlanta skyline, the city lights, right?
Yep.
Like it's like on the freeway there. That's just a perfect backdrop to kind of represent Atlanta, especially in the late '90s.
Yeah, and I've gone back and compared that image to the current downtown landscape, and it's just insane to see how much the city's grown in the past 26 years.
Right. Yeah, they needed to make a reboot of the set and do a modern one. Chubby Andruw Jones on a modern Atlanta cityscape or something.
Yeah, that's definitely.
All right. Well, that's a great top 5. Anything that you want to kind of throw out there to listeners to DM you about if they've got one they're selling? Anything in particular?
Just keep me in mind with the high-end Andruw Jones, A-Rod, and of course the Auburn guys.
Yeah. Well, that was a great conversation, man. Really appreciate you joining us, showing off your collection, and maybe we have you back in a year and talk about how things have changed.
Of course, and yeah, just a message to everyone out there: just collect what you love, and it'll go well. So
love it, man. All right, see you later. Thanks.
All right, see you, Zan. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Thanks again to Aaron for coming on and talking about his collecting. That was really fun. I will be out of town next week. We will upload an episode. It'll probably be something a little bit shorter, but I hope everyone enjoyed week 1 and going into week 2. Hope your team is doing all right. Hit us up on Instagram, follow us if you haven't, check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Be sure to DM us listener questions. We'll catch you next week.